What happens when humanity's greatest weakness becomes its most powerful weapon? When a simple act of kindness toward what you think is a helpless animal changes the course of an entire galactic war. Dr. Sarah thought she was rescuing a wounded creature from her backyard. She had no idea she was about to become the most wanted human in 3-star systems, or that her new pet would reveal secrets that would shake the foundations of an ancient alien empire. In a universe where most species see compassion as foolishness and emotional bonds as liability, humans are considered primitive. But sometimes being primitive is exactly what the galaxy needs. This is the story of how one woman's heart became the catalyst for revolution, and how humanity's most human trait, Doctor. Sarah pressed her face against the cool glass of her kitchen window, watching the storm rage across her backyard. Lightning split the sky in jagged lines, illuminating the small suburban landscape in stark black and white. She should have been in bed hours ago, but sleep had been elusive lately. The research grant rejection letter still sat on her desk, a constant reminder that her xenobiology career was hanging by a thread. The thunder rolled overhead as she turned away from the window, padding barefoot toward the coffee maker. The university had made it clear that without results, her department funding would be cut. Studying theoretical alien life forms was considered a waste of resources when there was no proof such life even existed. Sarah had dedicated 15 years to the field, and now it seemed like 15 years down the drain. A flash of movement outside caught her eye. She turned back to the window, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. There, near her garden shed, something was moving. At first, she thought it might be a raccoon or maybe a stray dog, but as lightning illuminated the yard again, she saw something that made her heart skip. The creature was unlike anything she had ever seen. About the size of a medium dog, it had sleek, dark fur that seemed to shimmer with an oily iridescence. But it was the way it moved that captured her attention. Even injured, there was something graceful and intelligent about its movements, something that spoke of awareness beyond any earthly animal. Sarah grabbed her rain jacket and a flashlight, her scientific mind overriding her common sense. She had spent her career theorizing about alien life, and now something extraordinary had literally fallen into her backyard. As she stepped outside, The rain soaked through her jacket almost immediately, but she barely noticed. The creature was huddled behind the shed, trying to shelter from the storm. As Sarah approached slowly, speaking in soft, reassuring tones, she could see that it was badly injured. Dark fluid, presumably blood, matted its fur on one side and it favored its left rear leg. Most striking were its eyes, large and multifaceted like a fly's, but with an unmistakable intelligence that made Sarah's breath catch. She had read countless papers about how first contact might occur, but none of them had involved finding a wounded alien in her garden during a thunderstorm. The creature watched her approach warily, but it didn't flee. Whether from injury or some intuitive trust, it allowed Sarah to come within a few feet. Speaking in the same gentle voice she used with frightened animals at the veterinary clinic where she sometimes volunteered, Sarah slowly extended her hand. The creature sniffed cautiously, then pressed its head against her palm. The gesture was so familiar, so universal that Sarah felt tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. Getting the creature inside proved easier than expected. It seemed to understand that she meant help, leaning against her as she supported its weight. Once in her living room under proper light, Sarah could see the extent of its injuries. Burns marked its side, as if from some kind of energy weapon, and its leg was definitely broken. Sarah's veterinary training kicked in. She gathered her first aid supplies and began cleaning the wounds, speaking constantly in soothing tones. The creature remained remarkably calm, watching her with those fascinating compound eyes. As she worked, Sarah noticed other details that confirmed her suspicions about its origins. Its bone structure was unlike anything terrestrial, and there were small metallic implants along its spine that pulsed with a faint blue light. As dawn broke, Sarah found herself curled up on her couch with the creature sleeping peacefully beside her. She had fashioned a splint for its leg and bandaged its wounds as best she could. Looking at her unexpected guest, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror. This was the discovery that could validate her entire career, but she also knew that revealing it to the authorities would likely mean never seeing the creature again. She decided to call it, after the star she could see through her living room window. Seemed to like the name, perking up whenever Sarah said it. Over the next few days, as recovered, Sarah began to understand that she was dealing with something far more complex than a lost animal. demonstrated problem-solving abilities that surpassed those of dolphins or great apes. When Sarah left for work at the university, she would return to find her furniture rearranged in logical patterns, as if had been studying the efficiency of room layouts. Food from the refrigerator would be sorted by nutritional content, and had somehow figured out how to operate the television remote, showing a particular fascination with nature documentaries. Most remarkably, began attempting to communicate. It started with simple mimicry of sounds Sarah made, but quickly evolved into what seemed like attempts at language. Could repeat back words with surprising accuracy, and appeared to be building associations between sounds and meanings at an incredible rate. Sarah found herself living a double life. At the university, she went through the motions of her regular research, all while knowing that the discovery of a lifetime was recuperating in her living room. She made excuses for why she couldn't attend evening faculty events, claiming she was working on a new research proposal. In a way, that wasn't entirely untrue. As the weeks passed, injuries healed with remarkable speed. The metallic implants along its spine seemed to accelerate the healing process, and soon was moving with a fluid grace that made Sarah think of dancers or martial artists. But with recovery came restlessness. Would stand by the windows for hours, looking up at the sky with what Sarah could only interpret as longing. It was during one of these sky-watching sessions that everything changed. Sarah was making dinner when suddenly became agitated, making a series of rapid clicking sounds she had never heard before. Following gaze, Sarah looked out the window to see lights moving across the sky in a pattern too deliberate to be natural. The lights descended toward her neighborhood, and Sarah felt her heart hammering as she realized they were heading directly for her house. Was making increasingly urgent sounds, pressing against Sarah's legs as if trying to communicate something vital. The metallic implants along spine were pulsing faster now, creating complex patterns of blue light. As the mysterious lights settled into her backyard, Sarah understood with crystal clarity that her quiet suburban life was about to end forever. Whatever was, wherever had come from, they had found her. Sarah looked down at her alien companion, seeing not the wounded creature she had rescued, but a being whose true nature she was only beginning to understand. The lights outside grew brighter, casting strange shadows through her windows, looked up at Sarah with those multifaceted eyes, and for the first time Sarah heard her speak in perfect, unaccented English. "Sarah," said, her voice melodic despite its alien origin, "I need you to trust me completely. What happens next will determine not just our fate, but the fate of your entire species. The war has found us, and Earth is about to become a battlefield whether it wants to be or not." Sarah stared at her companion, the creature she had thought of as a pet, and realized she had been incredibly naive. Was not some lost animal. Was a refugee, a survivor of something terrible happening in the galaxy beyond Earth's awareness. And now, whatever had been running from had arrived. The windows of Sarah's house began to vibrate with a low, thrumming sound that seemed to come from the lights outside. Sarah looked at, then at the lights, and made the decision that would change everything. "I trust you," she said simply. His compound eyes seemed to brighten with something that might have been relief or gratitude. "Then we run," replied. "We run, and I tell you everything. About the hegemony, about the war they're fighting, about why they want me dead, and about why humanity might be the only hope the galaxy has left." As if in response to words, the front door exploded inward with a sound like thunder. Dark shapes poured through the opening, moving with mechanical precision. Sarah caught a glimpse of beings in black armor before grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "The back door," said urgently. "Now." They ran through Sarah's kitchen as the sound of searching grew louder behind them. Sarah's mind reeled with questions, but there was no time for answers. As they burst through her back door into the night air, Sarah saw that her entire neighborhood was bathed in an unnatural blue light from the ships hovering overhead. Led her through the darkness with sure steps, moving between houses and through shadows with the confidence of someone who had done this before. Behind them, Sarah could hear the sounds of her house being torn apart by their pursuers. They reached the edge of the subdivision, where a small wooded area provided cover. Only then did stop, turning to face Sarah with those complex, beautiful eyes. "I am sorry," said, and Sarah could hear genuine regret in her voice. "I brought this to your world. But Sarah, you saved my life when you had no reason to trust me. That act of compassion, that willingness to help a stranger without expecting anything in return, that is what makes humans extraordinary. It is why we need your help. Sarah looked back toward her house, seeing lights moving through her windows as the search continued. Everything she had known, her quiet academic life, her carefully ordered world, was gone. But as she looked at this being who had spoken of war and hope in the same breath, she felt something she had not experienced in years. A purpose. They moved through the forest in silence for what felt like hours, leading with an almost supernatural ability to navigate in the darkness. Sarah's feet were already sore in her house slippers, and branches caught at her pajamas, but she pressed on. Behind them, the blue lights continued to sweep through the subdivision, and occasionally she could hear the distant sound of vehicles moving through the streets. They finally led her to a small clearing where a stream bubbled quietly through the darkness. Sarah collapsed onto a fallen log, her heart still racing from their escape. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the questions that had been building in her mind came flooding out. "Well, what are you?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer would be more complex than she could imagine. Settled beside her, moving with that fluid grace that Sarah now realized came from a fundamentally different evolutionary path. In the moonlight, compound eyes caught and reflected the light like prisms, creating tiny rainbows in the darkness. I am what your scientists would call though that term carries negative connotations in your popular culture, began, her English still perfect despite the impossible fact that she should not know the language at all. My species is called we are, or were, explorers and diplomats in what you would call the galactic hegemony. Sarah felt her scientific mind struggling to process the implications. A galactic government? How many species are we talking about? Over 3,000 member species across this spiral arm of the galaxy, replied. The hegemony has existed for nearly 50,000 of your years, maintaining peace and order through a strict hierarchical system. Each species is classified according to their capabilities and assigned roles within the greater structure. Though the way said it made Sarah suspect this classification system was not as benevolent as it sounded. And where would humans fit in this hierarchy? Was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a sadness that transcended species barriers. Humans would be classified as a Class 7 species. Agricultural workers, basic laborers, possibly entertainment if you showed sufficient creativity. The hegemony's assessment is based primarily on technological advancement, military capability, and what they term emotional stability. Humans would be considered too emotional, too unpredictable to be trusted with important roles. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. But that's not why you're here, is it? This isn't first contact. No, confirmed. I am here because I discovered something about the hegemony that they will kill to keep secret. And because I learned that their entire assessment of species value is not just wrong, but deliberately designed to prevent certain species from realizing their true potential. I stood and walked to the stream, her form silhouetted against the starlight. They were among the first species to join the hegemony voluntarily. We believed in their vision of galactic peace and cooperation. For generations, my people served as explorers and diplomats, traveling to new worlds and facilitating first contact with developing species. What changed? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. I was part of a deep exploration mission to the galaxy's outer rim. We discovered something that should not have existed according to hegemony records. An entire sector of space populated by species that had been marked as extinct or primitive in official databases. But these species were not extinct. They had been deliberately isolated, cut off from galactic civilization because they possessed traits the hegemony considered dangerous. Sarah leaned forward, her curiosity overriding her fear. What kind of traits? Emotional bonds that transcended species barriers. The ability to form genuine friendships and alliances based on affection rather than utility. Innovation driven by curiosity rather than profit. And most dangerous of all, the tendency to sacrifice individual gain for the welfare of others, even strangers. Understanding began to dawn on Sarah, and with it, a growing anger. The hegemony sees compassion as a threat. The hegemony is ruled by species that achieved their dominance through logic, efficiency, and the ruthless suppression of what they term irrational emotions. They have created a stable galactic civilization, but it is a cold one. Species are valued only for what they can produce or provide. Friendship, loyalty, love, these are seen as weaknesses that compromise efficiency. returned to sit beside Sarah, her compound eyes reflecting the stream's gentle movement. When my team discovered these hidden worlds, we also found evidence that the hegemony had been systematically suppressing species development for any species that showed strong emotional bonds or altruistic tendencies was either enslaved, relocated to isolated worlds, or in some cases, eliminated entirely. And you tried to expose this, Sarah guessed. My team tried to report our findings through official channels. We believed the hegemony leadership would want to know about these systematic violations of their own stated principles. His voice became bitter. Instead, we were branded as traitors and terrorists. My team members were hunted down and eliminated one by one. I escaped only because I was studying this planet when the purge began. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. That's how you learned English so quickly. You've been studying Earth. For 3 months, confirmed. Earth was on the list for eventual contact and classification. I was here to complete a cultural assessment when I received word about my team. I knew I could not return to hegemony space, so I went into hiding, trying to decide what to do next. But they found you. The energy signature from my ship's systems eventually gave me away. I managed to destroy most of the technology before they arrived, but not before sustaining the injuries you treated. I had resigned myself to capture or death when you found me. Turned to look directly at Sarah. What you did, taking in a wounded stranger without hesitation, asking for nothing in return, that proved everything my team discovered about suppressed species. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was hearing. So what happens now? Do we try to contact my government? They made a sound that might have been laughter, but without any humor. Sarah, your government has no weapons that could affect hegemony ships, no technology that could protect your people, and no political structure they would recognize as legitimate. If I revealed myself to your authorities, it would only accelerate Earth's contact with the hegemony. And based on what I have observed, humans would definitely be classified as dangerously emotional. The implications of that classification hung heavy in the night air. Sarah thought about humanity's history, their wars and conflicts, but also their art, their music, their capacity for self-sacrifice and love. There has to be something we can do. There is, said. and for the first time since their escape, Sarah heard hope in her voice. But it is dangerous beyond anything your species has ever attempted, and it would require you to trust me completely. Tell me. I stood again, looking up at the stars with those multifaceted eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge Sarah could barely imagine. The species in the hidden sectors are not just isolated, they are actively fighting back. There is a resistance movement, a coalition of the emotionally bonded species working to overthrow the hegemony. They call themselves the Free Alliance. And you think humans could help them? I think humans could lead them, said with quiet conviction. Everything I have observed about your species suggests you possess the emotional bonds and altruistic drives that the hegemony most fears. But more than that, you have something even the other resistance species lack. Which is the ability to form deep emotional connections across species barriers with remarkable ease. You took me in without knowing what I was, cared for me because I was hurt, nothing more. In 3,000 species across the galaxy, that level of immediate, instinctive compassion is almost unknown. Sarah thought about her childhood, surrounded by rescue animals her mother could never turn away. She thought about her chosen career, studying alien life forms she had never expected to meet out of pure curiosity and wonder. So what would we need to do? Well, we would need to get off Earth before the hegemony forces complete their search and lock down the system. We would need to make contact with the Free Alliance, and we would need to convince them that humanity deserves a chance to prove itself, despite being technologically primitive. Now, how do we get off Earth without a spaceship? That smiled, an expression that looked strange on her alien features, but somehow conveyed warmth nonetheless. Who says we do not have a spaceship? Sarah stared at her companion. I thought you said you destroyed your ship. I destroyed the main systems to prevent tracking and capture. But I did not destroy everything. My ship is hidden, damaged but repairable about 50 kilometers north of here. The question is whether we can reach it before the hegemony forces expand their search radius. And if we can't, then your world will receive an unexpected visit from hegemony diplomats, who will offer humanity the choice of joining their civilization as a Class 7 species, or facing the consequences of refusing their generous offer. Sarah looked back toward her former neighborhood, now just a glow on the horizon. Everything she had known was gone, but everything she had ever dreamed of discovering was sitting beside her, offering her a chance to be part of something larger than she had ever imagined. The damaged ship," she said slowly. "Can you repair it yourself?" "Not without help, and not without materials that would be difficult to obtain without revealing our presence." Sarah felt a smile tugging at her lips despite the desperate situation. "I don't think you fully understand what you're dealing with when it comes to humans and their relationship with technology." What do you mean?" "Well, we have a saying on Earth: necessity is the mother of invention. We've been making broken things work with whatever materials we can find since we learned to use tools. If your ship can be repaired at all, we'll find a way to do it." Thus compound eyes seemed to brighten with something that might have been amazement. "You would do this? Risk everything to help me reach the Free Alliance? Your planet, your entire species could face retaliation." Sarah thought about the choice she was facing: stay on Earth and watch her species become agricultural workers in an alien empire, or take a chance on something that could give humanity a future among the stars. When she put it that way, there was really no choice at all. You said that what makes humans dangerous to the hegemony is our ability to sacrifice for others, even strangers. Well, you're not a stranger anymore. You're my friend. And I've never been able to turn my back on a friend in need. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the stream and watching the stars. Finally spoke again. "Sarah, there is something else you should know before we attempt this. If we succeed in reaching the Free Alliance, if we convince them to accept humanity as allies, your life as you know it will be over forever. You will become a bridge between species, a diplomat in a war that spans star systems. You will see wonders beyond imagination, but you will also face dangers that could destroy entire worlds." Sarah considered this, thinking about her quiet academic life, her small apartment, her routine. Then she thought about the research she had always dreamed of doing, the discoveries she had always hoped to make, and the connections between species she had only theorized about. She said finally, "For the last 15 years, I've been studying theoretical alien life. because I believed that understanding other forms of consciousness was the most important work a human being could do. Now you're offering me the chance to actually do that work, to maybe help my entire species become part of something incredible. How could I possibly say no? Reached out and took Sarah's hand in her own. The gesture was so human, so familiar, that it took Sarah's breath away. Then we begin tomorrow. We find my ship, we repair it, and we take humanity's first steps toward the stars. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Sarah realized that everything she had ever wanted was finally within reach. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely impossible. The next 3 weeks tested every assumption Sarah had ever held about what was possible. They traveled north through back roads and forest paths, avoiding main highways where hegemony search teams might spot them. Had produced what looked like an ordinary camping gear from hidden compartments in her organic-looking outfit, but which turned out to be sophisticated technology disguised to appear human-made. The journey gave Sarah time to learn more about her companion and the galaxy beyond Earth. Was an incredible teacher, patient with Sarah's endless questions and generous with information that most humans would not encounter for centuries, if ever. She learned that they were one of the few species in the galaxy that experienced what humans would recognize as individual consciousness, rather than hive minds or collective intelligence. That is part of why my people were so valued as diplomats, explained as they walked through a dense forest on their 7th day of travel. Most species in the galaxy think in terms of collective benefit or logical optimization. Like humans, can understand individual motivation and personal relationships. Is that why you adapted to living with me so easily? Sarah asked, adjusting the pack had crafted for her from materials that looked like cloth but felt incredibly strong. Partially, admitted, but mostly because humans are remarkably easy to bond with. Your species seems designed for forming connections across difference. Even your fictional stories often focus on friendships and alliances between very different characters. Sarah thought about her favorite books and movies, realizing was right. We've always been fascinated by the idea of communication across barriers. Maybe because we have so many barriers between ourselves. That fascination is precisely what makes humans so dangerous to the hegemony. said seriously. A species that actively seeks to understand and connect with others cannot easily be controlled through isolation and categorization. They had been walking for hours when suddenly stopped, her compound eyes scanning the sky. Sarah followed her gaze but saw nothing except afternoon clouds and a few birds. "What is it?" she asked. "A patrol ship," said grimly. "Still far away, but following a search pattern. They are being very thorough." They took shelter under an overhang of rock, while the distant humming of alien engines passed overhead. Sarah used the break to ask something that had been bothering her for days. When we reach your ship, what exactly are we flying into? You've told me about the Free Alliance, but not much about what the war actually looks like." It was quiet for a long time, her eyes still scanning the sky. "The war is unlike anything humans have experienced because it is not primarily about territory or resources. It is about the fundamental question of what civilization should become." "The meaning?" The hegemony believes that the highest goal of intelligent life is stability and efficiency. They have created a galaxy where every species has a specific role, where conflict is minimized through rigid hierarchy, where individual desires are subordinated to collective function. From their perspective, they have achieved something remarkable. Sarah sensed there was more to the story, but the Free Alliance species believe that the highest goal of intelligent life is growth, discovery, and connection. We believe that diversity of thought and emotional bonds between individuals creates stronger, more adaptable civilizations. We see the hegemony's stability as stagnation. And both sides are willing to fight over this philosophical difference. Sarah, this is not merely philosophical. The hegemony system requires the suppression of billions of individuals across thousands of species. They maintain their stability through systematic oppression. The Free Alliance is not just fighting for independence. They are fighting for the right of every conscious being to determine their own path. The weight of what they were walking toward settled on Sarah's shoulders. This was not an adventure story where plucky heroes saved the day through cleverness and determination. This was a war between fundamentally different visions of what life in the galaxy should be. "Well, what happens if we lose?" she asked quietly. "If the Free Alliance loses, Species like humanity will spend the next 1,000 years as agricultural workers and entertainment for their betters. If the hegemony loses, every species will be free to choose their own level of technological development, their own social structures, their own relationships with other species. And if we win, what happens to Earth? If we win, Earth becomes whatever humanity chooses to make it. A garden world, a center of learning, a hub of galactic commerce, a launching point for further exploration. Your species would be free to pursue any path you can imagine. They continued walking as Sarah processed this. The scale of what was offering was almost incomprehensible. Not just first contact, but the opportunity for humanity to shape its own galactic future. On the 15th day of their journey, they finally reached the coordinates where ship was hidden. Sarah had expected to find something obviously alien, but instead they were standing in what appeared to be an ordinary forest clearing with a small pond. "Where is it?" Sarah asked, looking around confused. Ze smiled and placed her hand on what looked like an ordinary boulder beside the pond. The rock shimmered and dissolved, revealing a smooth metallic surface underneath. "Holographic camouflage," she explained. "The entire ship is here, just hidden." As continued to touch different parts of the apparently empty clearing, more and more of the ship was revealed. It was smaller than Sarah had expected, maybe the size of a large airplane, but its design was unlike anything human engineering had produced. Flowing curves and organic shapes made it look more grown than built. "It is beautiful," Sarah breathed and meant it completely. "These ships are partially biological," explained, leading her to what became visible as an entrance hatch. "They grow and adapt to their pilot over time. This ship has been with my family for 12 generations." Inside, the ship was even more remarkable. Surfaces glowed with soft bioluminescence, and controls seemed to respond to touch and even her thoughts. But Sarah's trained eye could also see the damage from the attack. Burn marks the walls, and several control surfaces were dark and lifeless. "How bad is it?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. The primary drive systems are intact, but the navigation computer is destroyed, along with most of the defensive systems. We can fly, But we cannot calculate jump coordinates or defend ourselves if we encounter hegemony forces. Sarah examined the damaged components with the methodical approach she had learned from years of laboratory work. The technology was far beyond anything on Earth, but the principles of repair were universal. Find the broken connections, bridge the gaps, restore functionality. "Well, what do you need for navigation?" she asked. "A quantum processor capable of calculating 11-dimensional hyperspace coordinates in real time," said, then saw Sarah's expression. "Which I know your planet does not possess." "Maybe not exactly," Sarah said slowly, "but we might be able to improvise something. Human computers work on different principles than yours, but they're very good at complex mathematical calculations. If you can show me the navigation equations, maybe we can build a hybrid system." What followed was the most intense collaboration of Sarah's life. Working 18 hours a day, she and dismantled Sarah's laptop computer and several electronic devices she had brought with her, integrating them with biotechnology in ways that should have been impossible. The ship seemed to accept the hybrid modifications, growing new organic connections to bridge the technological gap. Sarah's human intuition about engineering problems complemented its deep understanding of her ship's living systems. Together, they created something that was neither purely human nor purely, but something entirely new. This should not work," said wonderingly as they completed the final connections. "Human digital systems and biocomputers operate on completely different principles." "Maybe that's why it does work," Sarah suggested. "Different approaches to the same problems, creating new solutions neither of us could have developed alone." They spent another week testing systems and making final adjustments. The ship's organic components seemed to be learning to communicate with the human technology, creating new pathways and connections that improved performance beyond what either system could achieve alone. They finally declared them ready for departure. As Sarah strapped herself into a seat that molded itself to her body, she realized there was no going back from this moment. Once they left Earth's atmosphere, she would be committed to a path that could lead anywhere in the galaxy. "Are you ready?" asked, her hands moving over controls that glowed in response to her touch. Sarah looked out the ship's viewport at the Earth forest where she had spent the last weeks of her old life. In a few hours, she would see her home planet from space, something only a few hundred humans in history had experienced. In a few days, if their improvised navigation system worked, she would see alien stars and alien worlds. "I'm ready," she said, and discovered she meant it completely. The ship rose silently from the forest clearing, the holographic camouflage falling away like morning mist. Through the viewport, Sarah watched Earth grow smaller below them, feeling a mixture of sadness and excitement that brought tears to her eyes. "Sarah," said softly, "what you are doing, leaving everything you know to help strangers fight for freedom. This is exactly the kind of action that proves humanity deserves a place among the stars." As they broke through Earth's atmosphere and entered the infinite darkness of space, Sarah felt her perspective shift in ways she knew would change her forever. Earth was beautiful from space, of blue and white marble hanging in the cosmic void, but it was also just one world among billions. Humanity was just one species among thousands, but that did not make them less important. It made them part of something larger and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. "Where to first?" Sarah asked, watching alien constellations wheel past the viewport. 442b, replied, programming coordinates into their hybrid navigation system. "It is the current headquarters of the Free Alliance High Council. If we can convince them to meet with us, to hear what I have learned about humanity, then perhaps we can offer your species something more than slavery. And if we can't convince them, then we find another way," said with determination that transcended species barriers. "Because I have learned something about humans that the High Council needs to understand. You do not give up when something is worth fighting for, and freedom is always worth fighting for." As their ship engaged its faster-than-light drive, and the stars stretched into lines around them, Sarah felt herself becoming something she had never expected to be: humanity's first ambassador to the galaxy. The responsibility was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely perfect. Behind them, Earth continued its orbit around an ordinary yellow star, unaware that one of its children was about to change the course of galactic history. It was perfect. "Tell me everything," Sarah said, and meant it completely. I became their ticket to the stars,